What's up, everybody? FooserX here today for a special edition of my channel. We're going to start off with a bonus tip for singles defense, and then I'm going to give you a review of the new Foosballers movie that just hit theaters recently. It is now on iTunes for you to purchase. It's been in the film festival circuit for the past year, but it was a really big deal to watch this movie with all the Denver Foosers this week in a big theater, having some of the Hall of Fame legends there to answer questions. It was super exciting. Was that movie amazing? Was it a flop? I don't know. You're going to have to stick around to the end to find out. But before we get to that, I'm going to start off with a special bonus tip for new players, and that is singles defense. You know, you can play singles defense two ways. You can have both hands up front, or you can have one hand on the 5, and then you can control the goalie like this. And this will block slop and hacks. I prefer to play just up front, but that's just me. I like going head to head with my opponent. It will take somebody who is really dedicated to hacking me out for me to abandon that defense and come to this. So a lot of people grip the goalie 2 rods when they're playing like this with one hand on both metal rods, but that's not what I like to do. You know, and why is that? Well, first off, it requires big hands, you know, to do this. And I have big hands, by the way. I mean, look at that, ladies. And even I have sometimes have issues grabbing this because you're holding the rods, and when you're transitioning between the table, when you go to grab them, sometimes they'll spin up. It's kind of difficult to do that. You see, look how easy it is for these to come out of position when you're doing this. In addition to that, your attention is also divided. You know, we know from previous videos, and just like in life, in foosball, when you split your attention, you're not doing anything well on either hand, and that's bad news. You know, you're going to let in a lot of hacks, and you're going to let in a lot of passes. So before I share my technique, we all know that there's a lot of masters out there who use this, where they're holding both rods with one hand. So it's absolutely viable. It might even be the best way once you get used to it. But I'm just going to show you my way because it's super easy, and I feel like it has the same, if not better results, at least for me. So what I do is I put the front man on middle dot, or if I know that that other player has a really good left hook, I might move it slightly past big dot. And then with the goalie rod, that man, you just leave that guy right there, and that's it. You don't even move. This allows me to focus 100% of my attention on the 5-row. And most of the time, just having a hand back there will discourage all hacks. You know, instead of trying to worry about trying to control 2 bars at one time, we'll just hold this guy like right here, and we'll just, again, 100% of our focus is on this right here. So if you don't like hackers, you know, this is a viable alternative. And if they move the ball to the other side, then you just move your man to this side, and again, you don't move it. You're taking up half the goal. And if they move the ball back over there, you just do this. And you can even play this way from the normal forward position. You know, you can be blocking, having 5-row defense, and if they move the ball to the other side, real quick, just move that, and then you're back. I mean, look how fast that is. That's not fast enough for them to launch calculated hacks or passes. And once you get used to practicing with that, it becomes really easy. And so the other thing too is, if they're going to try to hack you with this, like this is the strategy you're using, and they're still trying to hack you through here, that's bad foosball. That's a low percentage play. They're trying to squeeze a ball into half the goal when you have a hand back there. That, to me, it's saying, hey, I am mentally weak, and I'm going to force this hack because I don't have confidence in my 5 or my 3, you know, shooting against your defense. So you're going to develop that mental edge right there. Like, you want them to hack you like this. So there you go, beginner tip. Super easy to learn because you don't have to worry about holding 2 rods in a weird way. All right. So now I'm going to get on to my review of Foosballers. I'm going to start off with my overall first impressions, and then I'm going to talk about the things I liked, and then get to some of the stuff that I didn't like, or I thought could have been better. All right, and first impression, great movie, loved it. If you're a Fooser, you have to watch it. You're going to love it. If you're not a Fooser, I still think you're going to like it. You know, one of my best friends came with me. He really enjoyed it, so I think it's going to be a fun experience. as somebody who has lived through this game for over 20 years now, but I also think it's going to be a good experience for somebody who's new to the sport. Also, being in Denver, knowing these people, I think that was also extra special. I think everybody walked out of that theater inspired to go get on a table as soon as possible to practice for their turn at open singles next year. So overall first impression, solid A. All right, so specifically, what did I like from this movie? Well, I liked the intro of all 6 Foosers. Tony, Ryan, Robbie, Terry Rue, Todd, and Cindy. Like right off the bat, they get you to invest in the characters of the movie. That was awesome. My favorite part of the whole movie was seeing Robbie and Todd Lafredo in their homes, on their tables practicing. It really gave you an idea of how serious that the masters treat this game compared to the average player. Like Robbie would wake up, he's eating breakfast while watching Inside Foos, rewinding shit. Like that was awesome. And then they showed Todd on his table drawing angles and release points with a pencil to map out Tony's 2 to the 5. They showed how he sprinkled flour on the table to trace the ball path to find the most efficient release point of a pull shot. You know, this was awesome stuff. I wish they had more of that in the movie from all the players. I don't think that anyone other than Todd in the movie really talked Foos theory or strategy. So I wanted more of that. I especially love how they tied in some of Todd's training methods and shots earlier in the movie to those that he did in the finals. They kind of had it over his head playing out the video recording or the cassette of Spears' exercises with him in the actual match against Tony. That was tremendous. That was genius. Next, I really came out of the movie impressed with Ryan Moore. For him to be a top 2 player in the world and still be focusing on growing his own business and kicking ass at life, but then still put on the brakes to dedicate himself to winning a world title, I would have liked to have seen a lot more of him because he is a legitimate rival for Tony, and people in the sport don't know that from this movie. And I'm actually going to get more into that point a little bit later, but mad props to him. And Terry Rue kind of spoke about this very thing too. When they switched to him, he also said like he wanted to play foosball for a living. He had very high foosball goals, but he just had to come to terms with balancing his own life, his career, his family. His kids were getting older, and he just couldn't dedicate himself the way others could or the way that he really wanted to. And for me, as an adult fooser with bills and obligations, I really liked the way these players were able to balance competing at the highest of levels with not just foosball, but real life. Cindy's a very accomplished police officer. I've talked with her a lot. She's got some great stories of chasing people down and drawing your gun. Like, this is amazing stuff to be able to have such a fulfilling life outside of the foosball room. I also liked Mike Bowers in this movie. His story of coming home, winning worlds, showing his check to his dad that he just made $4,000 in a few days of playing foosball, that he was going to quit college to go play foosball. Like, that was a great story, and it really tied into Tony's life, the way he's living it now, the way, you know, chase your dreams, and Tony is one of the few lucky players who can do that. So the movie almost came back around full circle. I mean, fuck, don't we all wish we could do what Tony's doing? I really liked Bauer's thoughts on why we need heroes in the sport, and again, I'm going to get to this in the next part because I really thought they could have explored that better. I liked it when Tony shared his trip. It was to some Asia country, I couldn't remember, but he gave the kids 3 tables and they presented him with a song that they had made for him. That was really amazing. I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of how foosball crosses cultural and gender lines, because we have a lot of players who travel to places like that. They did a little bit of that with the World Cup footage, but I wanted to see more. I wanted to see how European players treated Team USA. I wanted to see why it's so huge over there and not so much over here. And as a player who was lucky enough to see Rico in his prime, I really enjoyed him in this movie. Like, he was Tony before Tony. He would come over here, win everything, and then go back to Europe to win everything over there on 7 different tables. Like, he is crazy accomplished. I wanted him to get a little bit more run, but I realized that that's not what this movie was about, so I'm cool with that. But they did give him a little bit of screen time, saying like, hey, I would love to go over there and keep playing, but even when I go and win every single event, I still come back losing money. I enjoyed the history of foosball in this movie. We all kind of know that the 70s were the heyday and video games destroyed foosball in the arcade, so it was genuinely heartbreaking to see that in one fell swoop within a year, professional foosball just died, and all the players who wanted to play this for a living were forced to go find real jobs. Like, that moment in this movie was really, really well done. I mean, can you imagine, like, Major League Baseball players showing up to work opening day and nobody's in the stands being told, like, sorry guys, no more baseball. That's what this was. Again, there's part of this that I didn't care for, and I'm going to get to that real soon, but I really did think they did a good job with that history part, and I did enjoy that. I know my buddy who didn't know a lot about history, he really enjoyed that part too. All right, so now I'm going to get to some of the things that I didn't care for, some of the things that I thought could have been done better. And if you know me, I love movies. I love critiquing them. I look at movies in a different way than most people. When I was a kid, I wrote George Lucas a letter, Industrial Light and Magic, like, hey, I want to make movies. I want to make special effects for movies when I was a kid. So I've always grown up just immersing myself in movies. So I think I'm going to look at this a little bit different. I'm also a selfish foosball player. Like, I want what I want. I want to see what I want to see. So these are just my thoughts. They're not, they're absolutely not a knock on anybody's effort in this movie or the way people were portrayed. This is just me saying, hey, I wish I could have seen this. I wish this would have been handled differently. So, number one, I kind of think Cindy Head was shortchanged in this movie. She is the greatest player of all time. Like, man or woman, her accomplishments don't just rival Todd's, they blow them out of the water. The only time you really get a sense of how great she was in this movie is at the very end, before the credits. They have, like, each of the main characters standing there, and then they have their accomplishments at the end. And when they show Cindy, you can't even see the background. I think it might have been a mountain, but I don't know. It's just like Cindy Head and a wall of graphics, because that's how many titles and world titles she had. Like, that's how amazing she is. And we never really get a chance to see that greatness otherwise. So I don't really know what could have been different. Like, maybe if they would have stressed how great she was in the beginning, maybe if they could have interviewed more people, or if they would have had followed another girl or two, maybe having Linda Lee and some of the other players talking about what it would mean to beat Cindy. I think that could have conveyed what a legend she is. So when you really just focus on one woman out of all the female players, I kind of think you're losing something there. And not just for Cindy, but for the sport in general. And that gets me to another point. While I did like the history part of this movie was billed as follow 6 foosers on their quest for a world title. Like, that means a lot in terms of investing yourself in characters of a film. We want to care about them. We want to feel their pain, feel their victory. We want to feel as if we're alongside them for this journey. And for the first 20 minutes of this movie, that's what we get. It's awesome, because we're getting a look at these people's lives, why they care so much. But then this movie just takes like a 180-degree turn into foosball glory days and the history. And yes, I suppose you need that. But I feel like it went on for too long, and it kind of derailed the movie, at least for me. But I'm a fooser. I've heard these stories before, so maybe I'm not the intended audience. But I kind of feel like foosball really missed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. Because this movie, as fun as it comes across in the trailer, and me being a fooser, this movie has a very somber tone to it. It's almost a eulogy for the sport of American foosball. It starts off as, hey, this is a cool sport. We've got some youngsters, changing the game. There's rivalries. We've got families playing together and bonding over intense competition. We've got players traveling around the country having fun together, going across seas to represent the United States, taking part in this fantastic underground culture. That's a lot of fun. You're about to come into this world that you never knew existed, and you're going to want to stay after it's over. And then the movie just changes into, well, it used to be popular and huge, and now it's not. Now it's just old people playing and sitting down, reminiscing. Even the great old lion Lafredo is nearing the end of his reign, and then Mary ends the movie talking about how U.S. Foos is on life support, and the majority of players are now 40 to 50, and what's going to happen to them when they get older and stop playing. Where's this new crop of players going to come from? I mean, holy shit. Holy fuck. I should have wore all black to this event. I don't quite know what the purpose of this movie was, and I don't think it did either. It was a little confused on what it wanted to be. And then it had this blurb of spear juggling as a homeless person. Like, what was the point of that? To show that we have some eccentric people, that this is some weird underground sport, like LARPing? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to buy this movie and watch it again to see if my first impression of this movie was wrong, but this is the feeling I got walking out of it as a Fooser. You know, you had a chance to really highlight the camaraderie that is foosball and how it calls to people, how it chooses you, how we're all a family that thrives off competition and bringing out the best in each other. Like, let's market our sport here to people who are dying to break free from social media, from staring at their phones and playing video games. Instead, it came really close to reminding me of an exhibit at a museum. There's some old black and white photos of a game that used to be popular. In the great tournament of 1983, foosball collapsed as we know it. No, man, it's still fucking awesome. Just because you can't make a living playing this game doesn't mean it's not some badass sport to pick up. It's just like any other sport that way. Unless you're in the top 1% of all players, you're gonna have to make a living doing something else. We got golfers, bowlers, ultimate frisbee, rock climbing. Like, this is not the dying sport they made it out to be, especially when you can go to Europe and see how insane it is over there. You know, show some of the ladies, some of the hot chicks we have playing foosball. Show some of the up-and-comers. Show some matches where people are getting pumped up. Like, talk about why this game calls to people. I went in expecting to watch what goes into being the best in the world at something, like people's pursuit and greatness, and that's not really what this movie was about. You know, let's interview some of the younger players in the room to hear what they love about the game, who they're rooting for, who they think is the best, what drives them to keep playing, how do they feel when they get to play some of these legends of the game. Let's talk to more than one female Fooser. There's a lot of female parity right now. There's not just one or two female Foosers. I felt like exploring more players might have provided the feeling that this is still an exciting sport for everybody, not just the best in the world, not just players who are 50 years old. Like, let's follow these dudes around the country to see the back and forth nature of the top players, so to see that there is a legitimate rivalry between Tony and Ryan. Maybe that comes down to a budget thing with the film. Like, I don't know. And so this kind of gets me to my next point. There's no villain in this movie. And I kind of think movies need that. I'm not saying we need somebody to be the bad guy, but I feel like they could have taken an angle that created some drama, or at least an unexpected outcome. Like, even though Tony is steamrolling people in singles, again, maybe stress that Ryan and Tony went back and forth a lot over these tournaments, you know, not just singles. As the viewer, we want to see some drama. There's no excitement towards the end because the film starts off with Tony being the best ever and nobody really challenges him. And I can see the benefits of that, but at the same time, you need drama in a movie to really get the audience to invest more. And we had that in real life. Terry Rue and Robbie beat Tony and Todd in open doubles the year before. Like, if they would have shown some of that match or followed some of the other tour events where Ryan was winning a lot, you would have that. In 2014, Ryan won open singles and open doubles. And then in 2015, Tony comes back to win open singles. Like, these are very tough players capable of winning as well. So I think a rivalry angle would have been a lot more compelling, at least for me. And in general, I wanted more foosball talk. If you're going to take the angle that Tony is the best player right now, that he's some unstoppable force, why? What about Tony's game makes him so tough? I wanted more introspection from the best players on tour as to why Tony's the greatest right now. What about his game is so different than everybody else's? You know, they really only showed Todd game planning for his 2 to the 5 pass. And then they show Ryan like sitting on the couch, warming up his wrist, like, you know, I'm not going to smoke any cannabis leading up to this. That's my game plan. Really? That's it? That's all we fucking get? That's not showing people how much goes into winning from these best players. You know, how do they view doubles versus singles? Because open doubles is a primetime event too. What's it like for Tony and his girlfriend to play open mix together? Like, they won open mix together the year before, Faye and Tony. What was that like? What's it like touring together as a couple, as a power couple going into this event? What's it like the pressure on Faye playing with the best player? Who's your boyfriend? Like, let's see some of that coaching mixed in with a relationship. I don't know. I just felt like there was so much left on the table in terms of passionate storylines instead of this Glory Days tribute. You know, not just because I think it would be interesting for me, but it would showcase our sport, you know, because this is an amazing sport. And I don't think this movie did that. This movie was like a tribute to a dying sport. So as a Fooser who loves this game with a passion, who loves the heat of battle, I personally didn't care for the angle that they decided to take. If you guys want to watch some great documentaries on underground culture, check out The King of Kong and Pulling John. These are amazing movies because they really focused on the rivalries between the players of the sport. It really had you wanting to know, like, oh my gosh, is this John Brzezinski going to be able to beat this huge Russian? It's Rocky versus Drago. They could have absolutely done that with Ryan and Tony. And don't get me wrong, this was absolutely a fun flick. When are we ever going to have our sport on the big screen? It doesn't get any better than that. It's a great movie. It's still an absolute must-see for everybody here. So, all right, man, that about wraps it up. If you guys disagree, please post your thoughts below. My opinion and beliefs are always open to being changed. I welcome learning new perspectives, things I might have missed. I'm definitely going to watch this movie again to kind of revisit my thoughts on this, because it is an emotional experience for all of us Foosers, because we love this game so much. So, thanks everybody. Laters.